Hi again, everyone. Patrick Finkston here. I write the Illinoize political newsletter where you can read our stuff every day at the Illinoize, ILLINOIZE.com, covering state government and politics. And we are down to the wire at the end of the spring legislative session where it may look like nothing is happening, but all the big stuff is happening behind closed doors. Transparency be damned. So, we're going to get into some of those big issues and what may be happening between when we're recording this on Thursday the 16th and when the legislature is scheduled to adjourn on Friday the 24th, 8 days from now. Will they make it? There are a lot of questions still remaining as to what lawmakers will actually get done and if Governor Pritzker is going to get what he wants done in a new state budget and by the end of the legislative session. So coming up, we'll talk to State Representative Kam Buckner. He's an assistant majority leader. You'll remember last week we had House Republican leader Tony McCombie on the show, and we asked House Democrats if they wanted to provide someone, and Representative Buckner was kind enough to step up, and we had a chat with him on Thursday afternoon, so we'll share that with you coming up. And we'll talk to Ben Szalinski. He's a legislative reporter for the Daily Line, which is a newsletter and website that covers state government and city government in the city of Chicago. Ben's a good young reporter and doing a good job, and I think you'll be interested in what he has to say coming up on the show today. It's going to be a pretty wild next 8 days, and that's pretty consistent with how things have gone in Springfield over the years. My first legislative session as a reporter was in 2006. Not necessarily on the ground, but I was covering politics in Champaign. Wasn't at the State House, every day or anything like that, but was involved in covering the mess and the drama during the Blagojevich administration, and here we are, so many years later that it's still a little bit chaotic as we reach the end of the legislative session. I just don't think in the nature of politics, I don't know that that's ever going to change. The governor has a little bit of trouble on his hands with lawmakers. You might remember in February, the governor introduced a $53 billion or so spending plan that doesn't really include tax increases on people per se, no income tax increase, no state sales tax increase, those sort of things, but did increase some taxes by about $1 billion to things like gambling, sports gambling revenue, net loss deductions for businesses, and a clawback from retailers on the sales taxes that they remit to the state. We've heard in the last few weeks that some Democrats, specifically House Democrats, are concerned about some of those tax increases and whether they need to put an extra $800 million into the state budget. Governor Pritzker was in Springfield on Thursday and was asked about that.
Well, again, it's always a conversation. I put forward a budget in February. It's a proposal, and then it's up to the General Assembly to evaluate that, to ask us questions about that. If they feel like there are parts of it they either don't understand or they'd like to adjust, they want to come talk to us. We're open to that, and we've been talking to them all along about that. But I don't think there's any necessary change that needs to be made. Having said that, I know that there are various members of the General Assembly who have at times said, well, I wish that we would do this instead of that. And they have their own ideas, or they'd like to ratchet up or ratchet down a number that we have in the budget. So I don't think that there needs to be any change made, but we're always open to it. And of course, we're continuing to have those dialogues every day leading up to the end of session.
So of course, that's the governor defending his tax increase proposals and the fact that essentially he's standing by his man on that. the governor had a bit of an exchange with reporters. I had to clip a few things out of it just because there wasn't good sound there. But in terms of the questions he was asked, about the content or anything, but about all of the demands on the budget and the asks from Democratic lawmakers, and what they were doing in a memo last week, directing state agencies to essentially prepare for $800 million in cuts.
Well, the bulk of that work was done long before I introduced it in February. It takes about 6 months really to put the budget together. When I propose it, it isn't like we, just look at the old budget and add a little bit and there it goes. It's a whole lot of work. And I want to just remind all of you, the number one principle about my budgets has been and will always be, it has to be balanced. So whatever we end up with at the end of session this time, as all the times that I have been governor, is we've got to balance the budget. However that comes out, whether there are cuts that are made, revenue enhancement, whatever it is. And here I think we're going to end up with a balanced budget, so I feel very confident about that. Are there demands that are outside of what's in the budget? Of course there always are, and I think Ben raised the question that others would raise, which is why aren't you putting more money into EBF, or why aren't you putting more money into higher ed, and so on? And the answer is always because there's only so much to go around, and we're doing the best that we can to meet the needs of the moment that we're in. And there are vital areas to put money, and then there are less vital areas. And again, prioritizing those things every single year is part of my job, and then importantly, the 177 members of the General Assembly. I didn't ask for an $800 million. No. If you read that memo, it's a notice to our agencies to let them know that the General Assembly is considering their options and that there may be a need that the General Assembly sees to cut the budget by $800 million. And it's just a notice to all the agencies that may happen.
All right, so that's Governor Pritzker in Springfield on Thursday as the legislature tries to wrangle and negotiate a budget deal, as well as numerous other things that are on the plate. Let's talk more about that with State Representative Kam Buckner. All right, well, we appreciate Representative Kam Buckner, an assistant majority leader in the House of Representatives, for taking a few minutes with us. It's the week before adjournment, and I know things are crazy and busy. And Representative, I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your time, or a few minutes out of your day. A lot to get to, so I feel like I've got to start with the slating bill that you guys moved kind of out of nowhere a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of lit this bill on fire a little bit. So I've got to ask you about, like, you came into the House in January of 2019. You were elected with Mary Edley Allen, who was slated in the summer of 2018. And she's the last person to win who was slated. So what about her being in the House in 2018 when you won? I look at that and it's like, hey, it was convenient for us then, but we're doing this now because we've got incumbents to protect. I don't understand the rationale why Democrats did this.
Well, first I'll just say I was actually appointed in 2019 after the 2018 election. I wish I had enough foresight.
All right, my bad.
Election. No, it's all good. It's all good. But the question still is germane, right? And I understand the angst that people have and the issues that they have with this new kind of set of circumstances that have arose from this bill. But simply, Patrick, to me, this is really just about giving power back to voters. I think we have not just issues with the slating process, but as somebody who's appointed, I think there's some issues with the appointment process and some other things that we've done for a long time. And often we're captured by the past and we do things the way we've always done them because we think that's the only way to do them. But I think we should take opportunities to find better ways to achieve more substantial democracy if we can.
I appreciate that point, and the nominations for appointments is kind of backroom. I think we can both admit that. The alternative is an expensive special election, which everybody knows is is not always easy or conducive, and terrible turnout. But since 2010, anyone who's slated still has to get the requisite amount of petition signatures that are required. So it's not like it's just some old white guys in a room somewhere filling a seat. I mean, they've still got to go to the voters. And in addition to that, can you honestly tell me, and I'm not picking on you here. You're just the guy who was willing to sit down for this. Can you honestly tell me this isn't just about helping Katie Stewart win in November?
It's not. Once again, I think this is returning some power to the voters. This is leveling the playing field. Of course, the issues that are right in front of our face are the ones that people are going to pay the most attention to. But this isn't a Katie Stewart specific bill. This is really about finding ways to better operate and institute democracy here in the state of Illinois. And Patrick, I'll be very clear. I said this in the beginning. I'll say it again. I think there are problems with the slating process. I think there are problems with the appointment process. As a person who was appointed, I can stand here and admit that to you. I think a lot of the things that we have done are antiquated and really are obsolete. And so I'm glad that we're having a conversation. I think we should not dismiss the people who have concerns about it. I think these are fair and legitimate concerns, and we should continue to have conversations about the things we need to do to make things better.
All right. So on to the actual issues of what lies ahead in the next week. I want to start with the Bears, since that's just been such a huge issue out of nowhere, seemingly. When they came out with their stadium proposal a few weeks ago, the talk that I heard from folks associated with the Bears initially was this has to get done this spring. They ran into a brick wall between the governor, the House Speaker, the Senate President. You were at the Bears initial press conference. So where do you see this standing? Do you see it working? Do you support the idea as drafted? How do you feel about it?
Well, I'll say this. I was at that press conference, I think 4 or 5 Wednesdays ago in Chicago, because I was invited the day before and it was in my district. And I, like many Chicagoans and many people in Illinois, wanted to hear what this plan was. I wasn't there as a person who was supporting the plan because I had not at that point heard the plan. Now that I've heard the first salvo about the Bears, I think that it needs some tweaking, obviously. They've come to Springfield and had some conversations with folks about what they want to do and what their desire is. But I think that it's still early, right? I've been very clear about what I feel about public dollars for private stadium development. I think it's problematic. I've had that standpoint for a long time. And once again, I'm not coming to this as a novice. I spent a number of years in the front office of the Chicago Cubs, specifically working on the Wrigley Field renovation project, which was all done privately, right? And so I come to this from that background as a sports entertainment attorney, which I've done for a number of years. But I also am really staunchly committed to making sure that the people of Illinois and the people of Chicago are not left holding the bag here. The last Bears deal, which was 20 years ago, a stadium renovation deal, we still owe a lot of money, somewhere close to the tune of $500 million, right? And so this is a big deal, and we can't just sweep this under the rug. We all love the monsters of the Midway, and I, as a Chicagoan, want them to stay in Chicago. But we have to be smart and prudent about what we're doing financially. And so this proposal, as I've said, is just a proposal. They're proposing. They got to come back and let's find ways to tweak it and make it make sense. But we should have these conversations in public and intentionally, and not in some back room here in Springfield.
Is it just me that the issue here is less about the bonds for the stadium itself, because there is an existing funding mechanism there in the hotel tax that they aren't proposing raising? You can save some money potentially refinancing that Bears and White Sox money that's still on the books. Is the real issue the $1.5 billion that they want state taxpayers to come up with for infrastructure? Is that where this conversation hits a wall? I think
there you have to dissect the entire thing, right? You can't silo this thing and compartmentalize it. You gotta look at it in the totality. And I think there are issues with many of the facets of what has been presented to us thus far. Once again, thus far, I expect that we'll hear more. And I'll head back to the House floor after we're done talking. And many of the conversations I have with my colleagues will be around the budget and making sure that we can pass a balanced budget that mirrors what the people of Illinois want, need, and deserve. I'm sure that there are folks in my caucus who will say, as we loom towards a transit fiscal cliff, and I know you'll talk about some transit later, why shouldn't the hotel tax go to the CTA or Metro or PACE or RTA? There's a lot of needs and wants in this state. We've been very smart and prudent over the last few years. We got to maintain that. But I think you can't just silo this thing. You got to look at it in entirety. And as a Chicago representative, I think it's also fair for me to say it can't just be about what the state's going to spend. It has to be about what the city's going to lose if the current proposal goes forward. The Park District gets a decent amount of funding from the things that happen in Soldier Field. Are the Bears really asking to claw that back? I'm not sure if that's true or not. I know that's something that's been bandied about. So, I mean, these are all conversations we have to have, and we have to have them once again in public.
Real quick, is the idea dead, or do you think the state is going to be at least willing to play ball with something here?
I think the state has been willing to listen. Governor Pritzker has said that he wants to listen. The speaker has said he wants to listen, and so has the Senate president, right? So the door is open. No one has said, no one has said hell no. Everybody has said, bring us something that makes sense so we can talk about it. And so I think that's where we are right now.
All right, let's talk transit. This is, I know, something near and dear to your heart. I live in the suburbs. I take Metro all the time. I love Metro. It's reliable. It's inexpensive. It's great. CTA on the other side is completely unreliable. There are too many issues of crime on trains. The quality of trains that smell like urine and marijuana. They're not. It's not a pleasant experience, even if you didn't have any concerns about crime or if the train's even going to show up. What the heck are we going to do to reestablish any sort of public confidence in CTA at this point?
Yeah, as we loom towards this impending transit fiscal cliff, it's important for folks to push on folks like me and my colleagues to not just try to restructure the way that revenues work when it comes to public transit in the northern part of the state, but to also talk about reforms. It's governance reform, leadership reform, the way it actually works, right? We have, once again, an antiquated system. And I want to challenge that model, which is why you've seen some of the legislation you've seen over the last few weeks as we prepare here to really have that conversation. Public transit is a vital piece. It's the lifeblood of the way a metropolitan area and region works. It's important to the folks in Chicago and DuPage and Kane and Will and Cook. And we have to be committed to the fact that this is not just trains and buses. This is how people move around, right? And so I think Springfield, and rightfully so, is going to have to play a stronger role, a stronger position, in not just funding the systems, but making sure the systems are structured in a way that can create a transit network that actually works. That's going to require a lot from the state legislature. I think we begin to do that work. It's going to require buy-in from the governor. I know he's beginning to have some of those conversations. We can't just be hands-off anymore. We have to be aggressive.
You're involved in the idea of merging the different transit districts and organizations, and how would that make things better? I mean, RTA is essentially a piggy bank, right? For how money gets dispersed. Are PACE and CTA, are they really that interchangeable that putting everything under one roof will improve service that much?
It's not that they're interchangeable. It's that they have to work together. They have to be complementary of each other and not competitors, not just for funding, but for the way service works. Like, we spent a lot of time over the last 2 decades talking about the red line extension. And the truth of the matter is, wow, that's a big deal. And that's a big deal to me as a person who grew up south of the red line. And very often had to take a bus or walk a couple of miles to get home from the red line terminus. While that's a big deal, we could have made the system better and made it easier for people to get around by just having Metro and CTA work together, which they weren't doing. They're still not doing today. All right. And so when we talk about consolidation, it's not to belittle anybody. It's not to make it harder for these systems to work. It's to try to create a streamlined organizational structure where they can actually work together. I went maybe a couple of months ago to meet Representative Maurice West for lunch, and I took the Metro, and we met halfway between Chicago and Rockford. And as I got off the train, there was a pace bus that was there and it was leaving. And the next pace bus didn't come for another 40 minutes, right? There's no reason they shouldn't be coordinated. There's no reason that bus shouldn't have been waiting at least 3 minutes after the train left to pick up folks who may need to get on the next system for the next part of their journey. We've operated in silos too long. And so our hope, I know myself, Ron Villavalum, Evelyn Delgado, our hope is that we can create a process that streamlines it. Once again, this is the beginning of a conversation. This is not the final piece of it, but we should begin to have these conversations so we can build the system that people deserve.
One way or another, though, that cliff exists.
It does.
We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that's going to have to be filled somehow for a state that's not necessarily rolling in the cash at the moment. Are we talking about new taxes? Are we talking about higher user fees? What do you think the big picture is going to be to fill that hole?
The one thing that folks agree on is that we can't continue the old way of, the fare box recovery ratio where 50% of operational money has to come from the fare box. I think we can get to a point where ridership is high enough where that could work again. But for right now, we can't. We gotta prepare the system to be ready for creating some true reliability and accountability, which is what we're trying to do through some of our efforts. But I think, listen, we got to have conversations, right? I'm singing the same song as the governor on this, that we can't say no right now to anything. I know people don't ever talk about taxes and increased fees and whatever. Affordability is a problem, and we got to make sure that people can live in this state without breaking the piggy bank, especially when it comes to getting around their towns. But I think we need to be willing and open to see what we can do. But the first thing we have to do, Patrick, is to see where the waste and where the abuse may be financially in all of these systems. We don't know right now. I can guarantee you, if I was sitting here with a ledger looking at CTA's P&L, I could find some things that need to be changed. And the same thing may be true for Measure, may be true for PACE. I'm not sure. But I know definitely with the Chicago Transit Authority, that's true, right? So we should start there, figure out how we can cut and do a better job without cutting service. And then we should talk about how we bring in more revenue.
All right. So we're recording this early afternoon on Thursday, the 16th. There's 8 days, before you all are scheduled to adjourn, a little over 8 days. There seems to be a divide between House Democrats specifically and the governor on how to fill this $800-900 million hole in the state budget. The governor's proposed tax increases, sports gaming, retailers, net loss deduction on businesses, things that don't necessarily, impact the rank and file consumer, the rank and file voter. It's not like an income tax increase. So they're looking at that as maybe a way to not hurt people. Where is the pushback from your caucus? Because that sounds like that's the one of the big issues here is a fight within House Democrats over this.
Yeah, I won't call it a fight or I won't call it a pushback. I think these are constructive conversations. You don't just push the button on tax increases or revenue enhancements, whatever we want to call them, without having substantive conversations about what they're going to do and how we do it. And I think this is part of the process. I don't see a lot of daylight between the House Democratic Caucus and the governor on this. I think we'll continue to go through this process and figure out where we land, hopefully in a place that's best for the people of Illinois. But we've got to, once again, go through the process. 8 days is a long time, as you know, in Springfield time. And so
it's like months in the real world.
It's dog years, right? It's crazy, but we'll have those conversations. They're happening right now in this building. I'll be a part of some later today, and so I won't say that there's a lot of friction or a lot of pushback. I think people are asking poignant questions and looking for answers, and I think we'll get there.
what's the mood within your caucus? Because I know that there's like the governing wing and there's the progressive wing that wants to do more, wants to tax more, spend more, invest more, whatever terms you want to use. That was kind of what ran us into you guys running over your original schedule last year, was that governing versus progressive fight last year. Do you see that playing out again this year?
It may not. But once again, I look at this a little differently. I think this is healthy for the way a caucus like ours operates. And the truth of the matter is that and we've got a big tent, and the things that are important to me as a person that represents the South Side and downtown and the near north side of Chicago may be a little different than a person who may represent Belleville or Collinsville or Aurora or Rockford or East St. Louis or Peoria or Champaign, right? So it's not just ideological. Some of this is regional, and we're having the right conversations in our caucus. We got to get ourselves, through some of these processes so we can figure out, how we move forward. But the calendar is the calendar. We hope to be done on the day that we're supposed to be done. But obviously, the Constitution allows us a little bit more time, as we have figured out a way to do since I've been here. We'll find a way to get to, land the plane, which is a Springfield term I used to hear all the time. I haven't heard it much this year, so I'll bring it back. We'll find a way to land the plane on this year.
We heard it a lot last year.
It was all over.
Ran over.
I got plane sick.
One of your colleagues, Representative Fred Crespo from Hoffman Estates, made a point this week when you all passed a bill that was, essentially a line item in the budget, but there was no funding for it, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any funding for it. It was a teacher stipend, student teacher stipend bill. I think this is the one that he talked about, which nice idea, but there's not money for it. He kind of chastised you all a little bit that, hey guys, we're putting these line items in the budget. We're over promising. We can't deliver on these promises, and we need to be more responsible. What did you make of those comments?
I think Representative Crespo is coming from a place of financial prudence. I think he's thinking about, the fiscal health of the state, which is something that's important, that he needs to do that. I also will say that I'll just push back a little bit on some of that, because I think that we have to at least begin to start building the policy mechanisms we need to be the state that I think the people that live here and people that want to live here deserve to live in, right? And so I understand, the sentiments that Fred put forth, but I also would say that I think we've got to be able to do more than one thing at once and figure out how to kind of circle the square and bring them all together.
So I'll leave you with this, Representative, and I appreciate the time, and maybe we'll sit down and talk Illinois football, which is what we actually want to talk about most of the time. At some point.
We're close.
But the frustration that you hear from a lot of Republicans is that just a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, we were talking about a state budget at 38 billion. And the governor's proposed budget now is 53 billion. There was some COVID money there, et cetera, that kind of flux that number a little bit, but the state's taking more than it's taken from taxpayers in the past. The cost, I mean, you and I both, we both live up here. We both have little mouths to feed. It's expensive. Cost of living is outrageous. Property taxes are outrageous. It's hard to live here sometimes. Are you guys being responsible with taxpayer dollars, the money that we give to you, and ask you to spend prudently and frugally and responsibly? Are taxpayers getting what we need from you right now?
Listen, I think that should always be a question that the people should ask the folks in power, no matter what, right? That is a hallmark of our democracy. And I understand the concerns of many of my Democratic and my Republican colleagues to make sure that we are doing these things the right way. But I want to remind folks that I do think that we're being prudent and we're being smart. But I also want to remind folks that, when I got here in 2019, at the same time that the governor got here, 2 years before Chris Welch became Speaker, I think a year and a half before Don Harmon became Senate President, there was a lot to clean up. There was a lot to do and a lot to find ways to address. The 793-day budget impasse, I know it seems like a long time ago, but if you look at in my community, there are many folks, whether they're nonprofit owners or business owners, who suffered from that in a true way, in a real way. And so a lot of what we have done up to this point is cleanup. We're playing cleanup. But I make no bones about the fact that this is going to be a tough budget year, right? We don't have a surplus. We don't have federal help. We're not in the catbird seat, as folks may say. And so we got to make some tough decisions, and it has to be the smart thing for the people of Illinois. And so I think those questions should always be on the front burner. We should always be asking ourselves, what are we doing? Can we do more? Can we do better? Because at the end of the day, the fiscal health, the future of this state really lies in our hands, and we've got to be smart about that. And so I don't think that that's a misplaced question. I think it's the right one to ask. I think we got to continue to ask that of ourselves and of each other.
Yes or no? Do we adjourn next Friday?
I'm going to say yes.
I like your optimism. Representative Kam Buckner, appreciate the time. Thanks for doing this. I know things are busy in Springfield, but we appreciate the thoughts and the input and sharing it with us as always.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate you, man. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks to Representative Kam Buckner for his time, and always appreciate his conversation, and always willing to take on whatever questions I throw at him. He knows that I'm going to be a little bit tough and has no qualms with that. And I always appreciate Representative Buckner and his openness on these kind of conversations. Let's turn now to Ben Szalinski from the Daily Line, who covers state politics down in Springfield. Let's get a reporter's perspective from the Capitol. Ben Szalinski from the Daily Line, which is a daily publication. See, competitors can work together. We can all be friends.
Exactly.
Is joining us from the basement of the Capitol, where we've got that wonderful Capitol lighting. I give Ben a hard time every time I see him because he looks like a teenager, like that baby face going on. So, I'm like this grizzled old 40-year-old man, and Ben's sitting here like he's in his 8th grade algebra class. So, but Ben's been doing a great job, and wanted to take a few minutes with him to talk about what's going on at the State House here. As we're recording this Thursday afternoon, and it's about 8 days from adjournment. And Ben, as you see it, obviously the budget, but it seems like we still have a lot of unanswered questions with a week to go.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there could be a vast number of issues that come up. We always see that, at this time of year where there's 1 week left in session, and sometimes there's not a lot to do. And that's when ideas start percolating, or things that people have been trying to work out throughout the entire spring. They finally get to a point where, they can get across the finish line, and all of a sudden we have a massive bill on our hands that's going to reform something major. And we're going to see big changes and something controversial, and we'll have a ton of news. But right now, outside the budget, there is very little that's moving. There's various things from, school closure moratorium at CPS to maybe some discussion about hemp regulation, various healthcare things. Governor Pritzker's big healthcare proposal still needs to move forward. But outside of some of these issues that we've generally talked about all spring, there's nothing huge on the horizon outside the budget right now.
Let's talk about the Bears real quick, because when I first got the details of the proposal the night before the press conference, essentially the person that I talked to within that Bears circle told me this has to get done now. It's clearly been met with a brick wall from the governor, the speaker, and the Senate president. Is there in your mind, and we talked to Representative Buckner about this, is there in your mind, as you've seen, legislators essentially say, sorry, pal, we've got bigger fish to fry. Is there any mood for this? and I mean, it's going to be hard to do it in 7 days anyway, but is there any mood for anything at all on the Bears?
I don't think so. I mean, you never want to say no, that something is definitely not going to happen here in Springfield, but this is one of those issues that just seems completely out of reach at this point. Part of it, I think, is the Bears' timing on this. I mean, they just briefed Governor Pritzker, a week or two ago on this. They unveiled their plan at the very beginning of May. Things obviously can happen very quickly in Springfield. We've seen it all the time on various issues, but this is such a big, monumental thing, and it's a controversial thing. So it's not something that I think is easily just shoved across the finish line, because Democrats themselves they're skeptical of what they're hearing from the Bears. I think from, certain lawmakers, there's interest. They want to see the Bears stay in Chicago. They're interested in lakefront redevelopment or something that is going to provide, good economic benefits people in Chicago are going to be happy about. But in general, it's not. I mean, there's bigger issues. Like you said, there's a million different proposals for new funding for this program and that program, and improving education, improving healthcare. And, we passed the capital plan in 2019. Maybe these are projects that could have showed up in a capital plan 5 or 6 years ago, but to do a whole standalone thing and reward, frankly, $1.5 billion for infrastructure the state doesn't really have to fit in the budget right now, among all these other priorities of people asking for hundreds of millions to billions of dollars for their things. I think legislatures, as Governor Pritzker has said repeatedly, just value other things that more directly help the people of Illinois rather than help the Bears play 9 games in front of more people every Sunday.
Yeah. And I think the infrastructure thing is probably the poison pill here. I mean, the bonds for the stadium itself, that $900 million, they refinance what they did in 2003 and what's left on the Sox Park, and they've already got a funding source for it. But if you're financing $1.5 billion for infrastructure, say you do 30 years worth of bonds, you're talking that's $85 million a year the state has to pay back. And that comes from somewhere. That comes from schools, that comes from, services, that comes from somewhere else in that general revenue fund. And it really seems like that's where this thing just kind of hit a wall.
Yeah, exactly. I think, Brandon Johnson has said this doesn't increase taxes on anybody in Chicago. I mean, sure, the plan doesn't directly increase taxes, but at the end of the day,
the argument is that the hotel tax. The argument there is that the hotel tax is paid by visitors. That's where he gets to use that stealthy line.
Exactly, but at the end of the day, refinancing these bonds is just going to put the state on the hook for way more in future decades. So, is that a worthwhile investment? A lot of lawmakers say absolutely not.
All right, so Ben, I wanted to chat about the budget for a few minutes before we let you go about a busy day in Springfield. It seems right now there's a divide between the governor and House Democrats over his $800 million or so in tax increases, not directly to consumer taxes. There's the sports betting and the capital net loss deduction, those, some retail payback that was a discount given to them for transactions and giving money back to the state in terms of what they collect. But there still seems to be some reticence among House Democrats there. How far apart are we 8 days out?
It's a good question. In general, a lot of people are saying that there's still a ways to go. There's still time to work out our differences. And, certainly we do see a lot of things on the budget get done at the last minute. So as far as how far apart we really are, it's hard to say because, I'm sure that there's House Democrats who are worried about the tax increases. The optics of that in an election year can be kind of hard to pass up, regardless if those taxes really actually do hit just regular people or not. But the governor really wants these revenue enhancements to be able to move forward on his spending plan. And that's the argument I think he's trying to make to lawmakers, is that they're kind of just misunderstanding the issue is the way it sounds like it's being put. And he's trying to explain that in order to actually make these spending priorities that Democrats want to happen, you need more revenue, because we just don't have that. We're seeing slowdowns in the personal income tax. Corporate income tax has been down. It's forecast that sales tax is going to be down just because of an overall slower economic picture over the next year. Nothing that the state is doing, but to keep the spending up in the way that Democrats and Governor Pritzker want, the revenue has to come from somewhere, as everything does in the budget. So as far as how far apart we really are at this point, it generally would seem like it's probably more nuts and bolts, maybe a difference of how much that a tax should be increased. Maybe there's another tool that some lawmakers are looking at that the governor hasn't proposed. That's what the governor talked a little bit about when he took questions from reporters on Thursday morning, is that, there's probably just differences of opinion between the best way to get to these revenue numbers. So he's not really looking at making any significant revenue changes right now. He said doesn't see a need to change what he's looking for from state lawmakers, but also pointing out that at the end of the day, he gives the budget proposal to lawmakers in February. They have the freedom to kind of mix and match and change things as they see fit. So, there's probably a general consensus in some areas of the legislature behind the governor's proposal, but then others are wary that it's not enough or it's too much. Differences of opinion that you often see play out in the last few days of session.
Seems like that's why his deputy governor for the budget, Andy Menard, put out that memo to state agencies now about 10 days ago that said, prepare to cut $800 million. That was a message that, all right, Democrats, if you guys want to be responsible for cutting $1 billion in programs that impact real people, then you're going to get on board. And he's also trying to come at this from a perspective of, we're going to cost Rivers Casino a little bit of money. We're going to cost FanDuel a little bit of money. We're going to cost Amazon a little bit of money, but we're not going to go raise income taxes or we're not going to go raise sales taxes. So you see at least politically where the governor's making his move here. The question is, you've got so many Democrats that are, one, this is an election year. Traditionally, we want to hold the line. We want to keep things, keep from rocking the boat as much as possible. And then you've got the tax the rich. We want everything progressives. It just seems like the Democratic. In politics today, we talk so much about how Republicans are divided over national issues and national political figures, but all you have to look at are the governing versus progressive wing of Democrats to see just what a challenge they face in trying to get this done.
Yeah, we saw some of that play out a little bit last year when the healthcare program for undocumented residents was the big sticking point. A lot of Democrats really wanted to expand that program, and they were not happy that the governor was coming in and saying, hey, we actually need to cut the size of this program, and we're going to put caps in place, and this program is not going to grow. And some people are going to miss out on receiving healthcare through this program because we need to cut costs. And that, that divide among progressives and Democrats who are trying to balance the budget, who, are willing to negotiate on things like that. We saw that play out big time last year, and that's why we ended up having an extra week of session.
I don't know that he's old enough to buy beer, but he's good enough to talk about state politics. So
I'm old enough.
Ben Szalinski from the Daily Line. Where can we find your stuff?
You can just find it at thedailyline.com. It's a morning newsletter. Follow me on Twitter as well. I got a lot more up-to-date news, as it happens on Twitter versus the newsletter too.
Of course, read my newsletter first, then read his. So Ben, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Patrick.
All right. Thanks to Ben Szalinski for joining us on the program today. I appreciate his work and the job that he does for the Daily Line. And as we mentioned, they're competitors. So what? There's room for lots of us in Springfield, and we all do a little bit different things. So appreciate all the work that Ben does and the Daily Line does too. Appreciate you for taking time to join us today. Thanks to Ben. Thanks to Representative Kam Buckner. It's been a wild legislative session where it felt like it might be kind of quiet with the primary smacked in the middle there. And now here we are at the end of the May, and things are getting wild again. just like every year. We'll be back with more. Probably not next week because things are going to be slammed in Springfield, but we'll try and have something for you the week after they adjourn, and have more for you every day on theillinoize.com, and join our newsletter list. You can sign up on theillinoize.com and get our stuff every day. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.